WoodWorkGeek back here again, this time another chopping board. As you can see, this is a Sapele and Maple chopping board. It's got a Fanwheel or variation on Basketweave kind of pattern with two key shapes, rectangles and squares. And here you see me starting to mill up the wood for it. So the bulk of the wood used to this is Sapele, and I cut the Sapele into rectangular blocks. I'm getting 3 pieces out of each chunk, and you can see me resawing it on the felder bandsaw, and then just cleaning up the cut edge on the planer, which is to my left, and then just rinse and repeat. And here I've got the sawn maple, and I'm doing the same with that. So I've cut the width to be the same width as the Sapele, and then I'm just going to cut thinner strips of maple to go on either side of the Sapele. So in total the blocks are just under 30 mil, and the maple parts are just under 5 mil each. So I start off cutting about 5.5, 5.6 millimeters, and then plane and sand them down so I have clean, smooth surfaces to then glue up. The bandsaw here is kind of becoming a bit of a workhorse of the workshop, really. I'm using it more and more and more. I just get such a thinner cut compared to the table saw. So it's about 1 millimeter versus nearly 3 millimeters on the table saw. And when you're cutting expensive woods like maple and Sapele and walnut, that makes a big difference. So here you can see me making up the sandwiches, really. So I roughed them over there, and then I'm just running them through the drum sander just to make sure that they're all perfectly uniform, perfectly smooth, and all of the bandsaw marks are taken out of all of the pieces. So I do the Sapele first and then onto the maple, as you can see here. I have to apologise to the workshop, it's in a bit of a state at the minute. I've managed to get a new combination machine, and I'm just in the process of selling the old table saw and planer, which will then give me a chance to reorganise the garage and make it a little bit neater. So here's the maple. I lay out my maple so I can glue all the maple in one lump. So you can see me just spreading the glue all over one face of the maple, and then I shall put the Sapele in between. So you'll have maple, Sapele, maple, maple, Sapele, maple over and over again. And then you can see that creates a large part of the board, to be fair. So you only kind of make 2 shapes for this chopping board, so it's not a massively complicated board, but it does need quite a lot of parts. And the eagle-eyed out there will have noticed that I started off with 3 Sapele strips, but there's now 5, and that's because when I calculated how many parts I'd need, I realised that 3 was going to be nowhere near enough, so I machined another couple. Here I'm just trimming down the maple on the Sapele just so that I get clean edges, and then I think I put it through the fixers. Yeah, so here you can see I put it through the thicknesser just to clean up that edge so that everything's kind of squeaky clean and perfect. All edges are 90 degrees and everything is silky smooth. So you can see I'm just putting the maple sides through the drum sander so that all 5 pieces are perfectly uniform. There's no difference in width across any of them. They're all exactly the same. After I've got the sandwiches the right size, I then start milling up the square. So the size of the square is really important. So for this kind of pattern of board, what you need is one long length to equal a short width plus the size of the square, and that needs to be absolutely perfect, not nearly there or somewhere close. It needs to be absolutely perfect, because otherwise you'll get compound errors across the board and it will not glue up in a pretty way at all. So what I tend to do is I mark the kind of width that I need. I get it somewhere close, and then I use the drum sander just to finish, and I put the pieces on top of each other and use my fingertips with closed eyes to see if I can tell when I'm moving between the rectangle and the square, and you should barely feel any difference between the two. Once everything's done, it's then on to the bandsaw to cut everything to the right height. So this is an end grain board, so currently it's in face grain kind of format, so I cut them all down to 55mm or just over 2 inches in terms of length, all of the rectangles and the squares. And then this step here is where I get rid of the fuzz that you get from cutting it on the bandsaw. So each of the 6 sides needs to be trimmed down to remove those furry edges, otherwise you won't get a tight glue joint. Here number 2 comes and gives me a hand, so he's back from university, so there's about 120 odd bits in this board, so having an extra pair of hands was really handy, to be fair. The key here is not putting too little but not putting too much glue, and I used my finger for this one. I usually use a spreader, but I think the finger worked a lot better, and the accuracy of the joints was a lot higher. I would struggle to glue this kind of pattern up on my own just because the time it would take to glue up all of the pieces. Yeah, just beware. I mean, you've got about 40 minutes of kind of open time with the Type 1.3, but it's still tight for this board. But we got there, we got it done. And this was Christmas Eve, believe it or not. This was a board done in the holidays. The clamp you can see there is one that my dad made for me. He's an engineer, mechanic, and he welded up the angle iron frame and all of the nuts and bolts to that frame, so that I can then make any size board, and I'll always get a good kind of right angle clamping force on that. I didn't know if it would work with all of the edge angles, but actually it didn't turn out too bad. There is a slight deviation, and you'll see me here just toying with it. If you, from long end to long end, there's about 2mm difference, but what I do here is I cut the board to the pattern so that the board has perfect symmetry. So what you'll see is that all of the pattern is symmetrical left to right, top to bottom, so it all looks perfect. This did bite me a little when it comes to doing a juice groove, however, because without it being perfect 90 degrees on the CNC, I had to custom make a rectangle for the bit to follow that matched the exact size of the board. You never notice if you didn't use a tape measure. It looks square and perfect because the symmetry is there. But this did take a little bit of finagling, as you can see, backwards and forwards and measure, and backwards and forwards and measure, just to get it the best I could possibly get it. And here I come. Don't know if you'll notice it here, but I made a mistake here basically. I'm flattening the board to kind of give me a flat edge, but I suspect under one of the corners I had a little bit of dust or something, because later on when I try and put the juice groove in, you'll see that the juice groove cuts on the left but not on the right, which basically indicated that the board wasn't perfectly parallel. So I ended up having to flatten the top of the board again before I could put the juice grooves in, and you'll see that a little bit later on. Here I'm cutting the handles, so I just use the CNC these days just to get uniform patterns on both sides. It's a little bit easier than the jigs and clamps and routers. Normally I'd use a extractor dust boot, but so you can see the pattern. I've just kind of left it open so you can see what's going on. The next bit of CNCing is to put a logo in, so I changed a bit over to a tapered bullnose and basically cut in WoodWorkGeek logo in the center of the board. I've not used the kind of soldering iron burn marks on this board. It's just got the WoodWorkGeek logo etched underneath. It doesn't take too long. I think if anything I go slightly too deep on the logo, but you never notice, it'll all look good. And then comes the sanding, so I go through all the grits here, so it's 320, 220, 180, 150, then 120, 100, and just, yeah, it's lap after the board, top, back and sides. And here I just give you a quick kind of sample. No one likes to watch sanding, so I just put it on a kind of moving mat and then just do horizontals and verticals across the whole board. And when the pencil marks are gone, the sand is complete. And just go through all the grits. I tend to water pop it a couple of times, so normally 150, 180 or 180, 220, just to raise the grain so you get a silky smooth finish on the board. And here I take it to, I think I took it to 150 and then put it back on the CNC for the juice groove. So just before I put it on the CNC, I just go through and tidy up any imperfections. So the smallest imperfections, I just use sawdust and glue. But anything that's above 0.5 millimeter, you'll see me here use Stanley knife and, oh, whoopsie, spilt all the glue. A Stanley knife and a bit of offcut of Sapele from the same kind of blocks that we used on the board, and I just shave edges down, stick some glue on them and push them down in the hole so they're end grain orientated, and just push them all the way down so I get them as far down as I can, and then I come back with a flush cutting knife and then sand them in while the glue's still wet, and that then causes any sawdust to go into the glue and you get as close to perfect joint you can get, really. So here's the CNC. So this is where I realised the board isn't parallel, so you'll see the CNC go round and try and mark a groove in. You can see here just putting the groove in now, and what happens is that the left hand side has got a line going through it. If you look on the right hand side, there's no line, and that's because there's about 1 millimeter or so difference between the left side of the board and the right side of the board. As you can see me indicating with my thumbs down. So I was a bit bummed at this point, to be fair, because I'd already sanded to 150 and done all of the imperfections and everything. But it is what it is. You kind of have to roll the punches. So how did I recover? Well, it was back to reflattening. So I put the surfacing bit back in the CNC. I made sure the board was flat and level, and then I ground the top surface down so that it was as it should be, or as it should have been the first time. Then I cut the juice screws in, and it takes a little bit of time, but it kind of is what it is. You just let it go through and do what it needs to do. And once I've got all of the board flat, I run the juice groove program after changing to the bowl bit, obviously, and then just re-put the groove back in it, and the groove stays perfectly level side to side the second time around, which so it should have been from the beginning. But if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn, and it's all about learning. I must admit, the CNC's really upped my game in terms of the things I can make and produce. I held off for years getting a CNC, mainly due to cost, because they're not a cheap kind of hobbyist type of item. And this is kind of, for me, is a kind of serious hobby side kind of business. It's not my primary kind of role. I do IT for the day job. So yeah, it was a big investment, but one I do not regret in any way, shape or form. I wish I'd done it earlier. And it's taken me probably 9 months to a year to get used to programming the CNC and how to kind of get around the various different things that I want to do with it. But I'm now at a stage where I'm pretty comfortable putting stuff into the CNC. And here's the groove program, and you'll see this time you get a line all the way around, and it just looks perfect. And you'll notice each of the offsets left to right, front to back is perfect. So that little bit of time I took to measure the board pays off, because it is just slightly out of square, the board. But that's the joy of a CNC. You can adjust it. After doing all the juice grooves, I then move on to chamfering all the edges. So I go around each edge of the board, top and bottom, just putting a little 45 on all sides, just my preferred kind of finish. I don't yet use the CNC for this, but I probably could, to be fair. Maybe one for a future board. I do get a couple of bits of tear out there, as you can see me just pushing one bit to the side, and I did actually have to glue one bit back. But now we're in the home straight. We're into final finishing, so this is 180, I think. So I'll keep sanding to a minimum, because no one likes watching sanding, but you can see the board's already starting to look something a little bit special. So yeah, very happy with this board. I think it's one of the best boards I've ever made, to be fair. Now, after finishing off the sanding comes my favourite bit. You can see me just water popping. So this gives you a real taster of how the board's going to look. So I do a water pop, then I sand off all the raised grain, top, bottom, handles, and just see final edges and bits and pieces here. Just finishing it up so that I can then apply the finish. So I use a two-stage finish on this board. So Osmo's extra thin, and then when that's fully soaked in and dried out, I then come back over with a final coat of Osmo's top oil, my kind of go-to kind of oil, to be fair. And 2 coats should see this board through at least the next 6 months. The lucky recipient of this board is my eldest son, so no doubt when it needs oiling, he'll bring it straight back round for me to do again. And you can see there the CNC just ups the game in terms of logos. Here's kind of final finishing touch, just putting in feet. So use rubber feet with stainless steel screws. I've got a little jig for just making sure that each of the feet is square in each corner and uniform. So I just put a little pilot hole in, and then with a little Phillips bits, I then just cut the screws into the board, or screw the feet into the board as a final finishing touch. As you can see from the shine on that board, it is a very special kind of board. I'm sure the eldest will cherish it for years to come. The contrast of the Sapele and Maple seems to work really well. You get that kind of dark chocolatey brown of the Sapele with the kind of lighter beigey colour of the maple when it's oiled, and it gives a real strong contrast that makes the pattern pull out. And this pattern being, I think they call it Fanwheel or something like that. You have a little square in the centre, and then the rectangles go around the outside of the kind of centre, and each square is slightly off, so the pattern doesn't repeat uniformly. It steps 5mm each time, so it's really interesting to look at. I think I actually prefer it to my normal go-to, which is Basketweave, to be fair. And here we are, we're just about done. So I think the only thing left for me to do is the final coat of Osmose, and then when the Osmose is done, show off some pretty pictures. Now, if you made it this far through the video, well done. Not many people choose to watch more to the end, but if you did, then probably means you enjoyed the video and what it was I'm doing. So I'd be very thankful for a like and a subscribe. And if there's a particular style of chopping board or something you'd like me to have a go at next, just drop me a comment. I tend to reply to as many as I possibly can. And that is me just about done. So I'm going to check out now and call it a day. Be back soon.